have mercy on my soul. Oh, Father, I just pray for forgiveness. Please relieve me from my woes. Oh, please help me, you're my only witness. Have mercy on my soul. Oh, Father, I just pray for forgiveness. Please relieve me from my woes. Oh, please help me, you're my only witness. Keep dreaming on. It's not what it seems. Keep dreaming on. Don't
Good morning, Shabbat Shalom to everybody, man. You know who it is, man. One more time. It's your boy, the Kung Fu Hebrew, coming at you on a good Sabbath morning. How's everybody doing? I got a good show for you planned today, man. Once again, let me reintroduce myself.
And my man, my brother, Kung Fu Fighting, Kung Fu Hebrew. Ho, 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 ha! Ho, 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 ha!
All right, man. So y'all know what time it is this morning, man. It's a little early, man. I had a late podcast last night with my boy, man. If y'all haven't already, y'all know the other show I do, man, the Worst Podcast. So y'all can check that out when you get time. Let's see here. So first of all, man, I want to let y'all know that this show is brought to you by two sponsors. First of all, let's talk about Southern Fusion Bistro. And also, y'all know the show is also brought to you by, if you're out there, you're trying to create, not necessarily create, you have a business idea, you have a business plan, but you're not necessarily sure how to get it to the next level, and you want to be able to market and promote that. Go and listen to my boy Carl had to say about that.
What's good, my fellow ambitious entrepreneurs? Look, following our successful entrepreneur symposium, we at Prototype Consulting Group are thrilled to invite you to an exclusive opportunity. Yeah, I'm talking to you, the driven professional, striving to align your career passion with success, yet facing challenges in sales and market reach. It is time to transform your journey now. I want to introduce you to our 5-day Revitalize Your Offer Challenge. It's a dynamic, hands-on experience designed to empower you. Here you'll learn to craft an offer so compelling that your clients will be eager to say yes. Day by day, you'll gain invaluable insights, learn to think like your customer, understand the intrinsic and extrinsic values of your offerings, and master the art of creating an irresistible offer stack. Now, what's more, this transformative journey is completely free. I'm giving it to you as my birthday present, right? Now, there is an option for a VIP upgrade offering more value. Now, our approach is very direct, solution-focused, and tailored for you, the emerging entrepreneur. Now, we're dedicated to your growth and success. Spaces are limited. I can't ask you questions all day long. But if you if you enroll now and take the first step aligning your passion with profitability, visit our website and join the Revitalize Your Offer Challenge today. I look forward to seeing you there. And I'm out.
All right, so should be back now. Make sure this is not playing. We should be good now. For some reason, this is kind of messed up right now. I don't know why I can't see what's on my screen right now. But hey, I'm gonna try to do my best to get through it because I don't know why I'm having technical difficulties. But yeah, like I said today, man, we're talking about you know uh, the 5 prototypes of men in the Bible. Which one are you? And which one do you attract, right? So we already did the other lesson that I did were the 5 biblical prototypes of women. Now, I know some people will say there are more than 5 types of men in the Bible. I understand that. This is just, once again, just an example. I'm not saying there aren't different characteristics or whatnot, but I like the number 5, that book that I'm not necessarily I dislike it, but the book, the 5 love language. I feel like 5 is a good number, so you should be able to get a general idea about that. Number 1, let's talk about the objectives. All right, the objectives are going to be to expand the lives of 5 biblical men. Number 2, explain the characteristics of each, and number 3, we're going to view them in a modern context. Hold on 1 second, because I really need to try to take this out and bring it back up. And maybe I'll be able to get it, because it's like the way this is looking right now on my side, it's just looking kind of crazy right now because I can read what I'm looking at. I can read it, but I'm reading it, I don't know if you've ever been in StreamYard. Anyway, ain't enough about that. I'm going to get through it because I don't know why it's saying that the browser can't show the clip right now. Shout out to everybody checking in right now. What up, Birdie, man? What's going on, man? Yeah, so let me go ahead and get into it real quick, and I'm going to try to get through it, but I'm looking at a very, very small representation of what I'm supposed to be talking about, so let's go. All right, once again, we always come to this conversation with an open mind. I know I'll make this a little bit easier. We need to make sure that, when we come into these conversations, it's not about talking in absolutes. I don't deal like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to point out, like I said, these different men in the Bible, point out characteristics of it, and then talk about who this type of person would be, and also explain the characteristics of if you're looking for these type of men, or if you're experienced or you're dealing with these type of men, it would basically give you a better understanding of not even necessarily how to deal with them, because we're speaking from a biblical perspective. However, it should give you some assistance in that. All right, so now I'm gonna do this alongside my other one. So let's go. All right, so my opening scripture is going to come through from Matthew 12:34-36, and it says, verse 34, "You brood of vipers, how can you who are evil say anything good? For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. A good man brings good things out of the good stored up in him, and an evil man brings up evil things out of the evil stored up in him. But I tell you that everyone will have to give account on the day of judgment for every empty word that they have spoken." Once again, this is straight out of the red letters of the Mashiach himself. He's telling you that good men speak good things, evil men speak evil things. There is no in between. So you have to be able to understand and identify if you are a man and you are speaking evil, right? There is no, you're an evil person. You understand what I'm saying? There is no in between. If you are a good man and you are speaking good things, then that is what you should continue to do, right? Same thing with women. If you're dealing with a man who is dealing with evil, you have an evil man. There's no way there is no, there is no light, and there is no, there's either one or the other. Light, dark, black, white, good, evil. You don't want to try to live your life living in that gray area. So once again, I think that's a very strong, what he's saying in verse 35. A good man brings good things out of the good that is stored up in him, meaning he has a reserve of goodness within him, which means that, men out there, when you're feeling like it's time to give up, or you're feeling like, you understand, you should have enough good in you stored up that it's like you always got some reserve. Like, I say like the Eastern African marathon runners that you see, right? They got plenty of reserves stored up to run these distance races versus somebody who's more of a sprinter. They still have speed, right? But it's not built for a long distance race, right? So when we're dealing with our relationships and our partners, the goal is not to be a sprinter, meaning, yeah, we're fast, it's good, it's the highlight, because I know the Olympics are coming this year, and I've probably never watched some of those longer races. I enjoy the sprints because they're quicker, they're easier to get over with. But when we're talking about relationships, you should be looking for someone who's more like a marathon runner versus the sprinter. So let's get into these people. All right. First person up, Jacob, or who was later called Israel. Now let's look at some of the characteristics of Jacob. Jacob was hardworking, right? Obviously, he was family oriented. He was humble. He was a provider, and he was a leader. Now, we know some of those characteristics, that he was hardworking, because women out here, once again, you got to remember, Jacob had to work for 7 years just to get Rachel after he was given Leah. You understand what I'm saying? So you have to understand that a man needs to be able to willing, the guy who all these people say, who later became Israel, who a lot of these people want to claim is who they descend from, that Israel, that Jacob, he had to work 7 years for a woman. But I guarantee you none of them brothers would say, oh, I'm going to work 7 years for a woman, even though he is the patriarch of everything we stand for. So a man who is not willing to put in the work for you don't need to be calling himself an Israelite. Don't need to be saying he descended from Jacob, because if you are the seed of your father, like some of these dudes say, then you need to act like it. So you need to be willing to also put in the work. That I don't mean you play yourself out there. But what it does mean is you have to let a woman, I think a woman would know, if a man had to work 7 years just to be with you, I think that would definitely demonstrate the caliber of man he was. All right. I say he was humble, right? Because the story goes that he fought with an angel. Some people say he wrestled with God. I'm going to say he wrestled with an angel and was able to hold his own, right? So he was humble because he didn't really understand all of the strength that was inside of him. You understand? Because if he would have understood that, then you can get arrogant if you can go toe to toe with an angel and come out unscathed. He kind of think he got his little hip knocked out of place or something like that. But if that's the only wound that you had after wrestling with an angel, I think that's pretty powerful, right? Of course, he was a leader. Now, some things that you need to realize about Jacob: he was a mama's boy, right? Because we know that Esau was the man of the field who was with his father, right? And we know that Rebecca loved Jacob, so Jacob was kind of with his mama. They said he was a man amongst the 10 who dwells in tents. So we got to be able to understand that. And I don't mean to say that as a negative. I'm only saying that some people could say, like, if you're too close to your mother, that could be problematic, right? Deceitful. I put he was deceitful because he deceived his own father. And regardless of how you feel about that, it doesn't change the fact of what happened. He deceived his own father to get his birthright. Now, you could argue whether or not he deserved it already, because Esau sold it to him for a cup of soup. But I'm not here. But once again, he had a deceitful streak about him. So you should be able to understand that none of these men are perfect. Okay, that's not the whole point, just to sit here and talk about how great they were, because they were great. But the point is, you have to look at even the patriarchs. This is one of the patriarchs, had flaws, right? He was deceitful. He was kind of passive, right? If you look at what happened dealing with Laban, he never really wanted to be the aggressor. When he said, okay, I'll take the certain sheep that are of a certain color, and deal with that. Or even when Laban knew he was taking advantage of Jacob, because he saw while Jacob was around, he was being blessed. This is what happened. So Jacob was also passive. Another thing I say was he was kind of soft. If you look at some of the things that happened between him and Leah and all the other things that was going on, Jacob didn't necessarily just run in and shut things down. He wasn't a very assertive man like we'll see in some of the other, but he was kind of soft. You got to be able to understand the people who you're reading about. And last, he was a homebody, meaning that's what they said. He dwelt amongst the tent. So this would be that kind of man out there who doesn't like going out, who wants to kind of keep to himself, who you're probably not going to find out anywhere a lot. He really wants to try to keep to himself. That's this type of man. All right. So let's see. So now, a good match for Jacob would be a woman who likes to be chased. All right. And when I say chased, I mean chased to the point where you understand, not just chasing for the sake of being chased because you enjoy that. I mean chased as far as you really want to set your standards high and say, I'm going to make a man earn every single thing that he has with me. That is, you need to find you a Jacob who's willing to demonstrate and show over a consistent period of time that he is willing to put in the work. All right. So a woman that likes to be chased, with the outcome being marriage or a long-term relationship. A woman who is not aggressive. An aggressive woman would not be good with a Jacob. All right, for all the reasons that I've already explained why. Because we understand that Jacob had a good heart and all those other things as well. So a An aggressive woman might be able to take advantage of him. A housewife is definitely a good match for Jacob because Jacob was a provider. He took care of his family. They were extremely well off. So with Jacob, if you're a career woman or something like that, a Jacob probably wouldn't be somebody for you. And last, somebody who is non-combative, like I said, because Jacob is kind of passive. Jacob is kind of passive and soft, like I already talked about. You wouldn't want a combative woman that's really trying to argue all the time, because then he's just going to probably take the high road and just be like, all right, you got it. And you don't want to necessarily deal with a guy like that. I mean, those are the good matches. The bad matches, like I said, aggressive women, party girls, women who don't want children, because we know Jacob at least had 12. I'm sorry, he at least had 13. Sorry, Donna, my bad. He at least had 13. So if you're a woman who doesn't want kids, you're a horrible match. And like I already talked about in the other one, a career woman. So let's talk about, did it switch? Let me see. So Jacob today, he would be a doctor or any other profession that requires long study. A man of means who is traditional and wants a traditional woman. This is your Jacob today. This would be that doctor, lawyer, somebody of who earns a good deal of money, someone who works for a high-level accountant, someone that their field, number one, requires a high deal of study, surgeons, things like this. This would be your Jacob in today, but with all of the money, with all of the success, it doesn't go to his head and change the humble, traditional family man who he is at his core, right? So this would be your Jacob today. Well, let's keep going. Isaac, one of my favorite characters in the Bible, and I would probably say for most women, you probably want to be shooting for an Isaac, because unlike Abraham, unlike Jacob, unlike some of the other people, Moses in the Bible, this is your monogamous person right here. From what the Bible says, and if I'm wrong, you can show me the scripture and verse. Well, I'm wrong. But Isaac, out of Abraham, Isaac, when we say we worship the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, right? Then Isaac was the only one that was monogamous, right? The only one to have one wife. From what we know, he doesn't have any concubines or any other women. So to me, this should be the prototypical man, biblically speaking. So women, if you are a Bible believer, you use this book to kind of design how you want to go through life. You should be looking for an Isaac, in my opinion. It's no disrespect to Jacob, but we do know that Jacob dealt with 4 women. Okay, we do not get we don't get to the Messiah without multiple women. So you have to understand that, because Jacob was working hard for Rachel, not Leah. Even though Judah was born to Leah, it wasn't necessarily supposed to go that way. Okay, so let's talk about Isaac, man. Isaac was humble, right? We know the story with him and Abraham, knowing how humble he was to basically say, if he needs to be sacrificed for the Most High, if this is what my father wants of me, he was willing to do that. And if you watch some of my earlier shows, he wasn't no little boy at the time. You know, if you go back and look at it, he was in his 20s when this happened. He wasn't no little 4 or 5-year-old boy when he went to the mountains, and I showed you that. So if you go back to some of my earlier shows where I talked about how old Isaac actually was, in that scene where God slowed Abraham's hand when he was about to sacrifice him and the ram in the bush, then yeah, Isaac was definitely a humble person. I've already talked about how he was monogamous. He was very unselfish. He loved, even though he favored Esau, he loved both his sons. You could tell he loved his wife. He seemed to be a very generous and giving person. You don't really see anything in Isaac's demeanor that you can necessarily talk bad about. You know what I mean? But he was a good father, right? And he was also respectful. One problem that I kind of looked over with Isaac was he was what I call a little bit of a pushover. Now, you can look at that as being negative or positive, but you have to kind of look at how things were going. With Isaac, he had the same kind of situation where I don't remember if he went to some city, he did the same thing where he was worried about someone taking Rebecca. So he said, tell the men that you're my sister. So you got to remember that happened with him as well. So he is somewhat of a pushover, but once again, I think that this goes kind of back to his humble demeanor. He was passive. He showed favoritism towards his kids, which I don't think was a great thing. But once again, I'm only dealing with what we see. Okay, so he showed favoritism. Also, he avoids conflict. And 3, he is simple, right? Meaning, if you look at how he lived his life, if you look at everything in the story of Isaac, he doesn't seem to be this like real glamorous, real looking for all these different types of things. He seemed to be a very simple man. Okay. Good match, submissive woman. All right, or submissive women, supportive and comforting women, and a good communicator. Right now, we can say this about basically any woman out there, right? These are good characteristics of any woman, but definitely if you're dealing with an Isaac, you definitely want to be submissive. You definitely want to have that supportive and comforting mentality, and you also have to be a very good communicator. Okay. Oh, I didn't hit the slide. Sorry about that. So yeah, that's what I was talking about. Right. Bad match for him would be women with children. All right. So the reason why you would be a bad match for an Isaac is because if you look at kind of how he was, and you look at how he was, if you have, I would say, multiple children, like more than one, right? Because I feel like the Isaacs are going to be your stepfather. So if you're looking for a biblical example of what a stepfather would be, I feel like Isaac would be the example, because he would take on somebody else's kid and take them and love them as his own. However, I do believe that, that could be taken advantage of if it wasn't with the right woman. Okay, because I believe he would take on those children as his own. All right. Alpha women, meaning I've already told you, Isaac was humble. He was kind of passive, not really assertive. So a woman who likes to lead, a dominating woman, would be a bad match for Isaac, because, they would basically try to run all over him. And dishonest women, I want to say that, if you remember the story of Jacob and Esau, you remember when Jacob deceived his father, right? He was he wanted to believe, he wouldn't want to believe anything, even though he was kind of saying, well, when I touch his hand, it's Esau, but the voice is Jacob. So he wanted to believe in his heart of hearts. So sometimes he would want to believe things, even though he probably know that was true. So a dishonest woman would not be a good match for a Isaac. And if you're looking for your Isaac today, this is your blue collar men. These are your blue collar. I would even call them blue collar professionals, because Isaac was not he was wealthy as well, right? But these are people who have that blue collar mentality, people who are at the top of these jobs that necessarily don't require a high level, right? But you have other jobs that pay, plumbers, HVAC. You have, these are like your truck drivers. You understand what I'm saying? Like, these are the men who understand that they can not necessarily have to go to college and things like that, but they are able to make a good to decent living, right? Using things that they have around them. So I feel like this is who Isaac was. He's a very religious person, and he wants a family. He's not out here in the street. He's not out here doing the most. You understand what I'm saying? These are the brothers out here that are actually looking to have and start families. All right. So you want to like these. This is the Isaac, to me, would be the prototype for, I would probably say 80 to 90% of women should be looking for Isaac. However, one of the next 3 individuals, I feel like women are kind of going for a little bit more, okay, versus the Jacobs or the Isaacs, right? And then the last thing I say, he's family oriented. All right, so let's get to the next one. Good old Solomon, right? Now, the good things about Solomon is he was intelligent. Obviously, he prayed to God. He could have had all these things: wealth, strength, riches, many different things that he could have decided to take on. And he asked for wisdom, right? So he was successful. He was wealthy. He was a good communicator. He was also popular. If you go back and you read the story of Solomon, it talks about all the different kingdoms who wanted to just experience some of his wisdom. All of these people coming in from the kings of Tyre. He had a relationship where they would send different riddles back and forth to each other. Talks about how the Queen of Sheba came just to hear Solomon's wisdom. So he was a very popular individual. Now, some of the things that you could look at a little differently was he was not monogamous, right? So we know the story. He had 700 wives and 300 concubines. That's 1,000 women. So he was definitely not the guy that you're looking for if you're trying to get one man to yourself and you don't want him dealing with other women. He was stubborn. Multiple examples in Solomon's life where he was stubborn. He didn't necessarily take the counsel or accept the counsel of other people. easily persuaded by women. I should probably add that caveat on there because this is what got him into trouble later on in his life. He was easily persuaded by the women, and they got him into things like idolatry and things like that. So you have to understand that he was easily persuaded, even with all that wisdom. Okay. Hyper libido. I mean, any man with 700 wives and 300 concubines, I mean, you have to assume that, you know, Solomon was getting it in. You know what I mean? Like I mean, you don't have 1,000 women and you just got them just so I can, you know, show off. Hey, look, this is my harem over here with all of these women. And then the last thing, his weakness was women. Okay. So you have to understand, if you're dealing with a Solomon, these are some of the things that you're going to have to deal with, you know. And if you're dealing with a Solomon, you got to be ready for all the things that come along with dealing with a Solomon. So when you look at everything on the left hand, right, then you say, well, those sound great, but everything on the right, you might not be willing to deal with. But if you're dealing with a Solomon, this is more than likely what you're going to get. All right, let's keep going. So a bad match for a Solomon is a good match, I'm sorry, is someone who is polyamorous, meaning that you can deal with more than one woman being with your man. So if you're not polyamorous, then a Solomon is not for you, because he will end up cheating on you. He will end up having plenty of women, and you'll be sitting around saying, well, wasn't I enough? But I'm telling you, if someone displays the characteristics of a Solomon, you have to understand that this is how he's going to operate. Someone who is sexually open. Once again, a man who has 1,000 wives. I mean, it's only so many times that you can, you know, bake that cake. You understand what I'm saying? So you got to be somewhat of a sexually open person if we're talking about a man who had an appetite for at least 1,000 women. A non-jealous woman, because if you're going to be dealing with a man who has multiple women, you can't be a jealous woman, because you're going to basically drive yourself insane, worried about what he's doing when he's not with you, worrying about what he's doing if he's with one of his other wives, concubines, girlfriends, however we want to label them. You're going to do that. So you would have to be a non-jealous. And then I say non-clingy, meaning that if you require a lot of time and you need a lot of those type of things, a Solomon is not going to be a good match for you. Okay. He's not going to be a good match. You would have to be one of these women who understand what's going on, understand what you signed up for, and you should have the somewhat of independence to be able to occupy your time when Solomon is not around. Okay, so a non-clingy woman. All right, so here we go. A bad match is a vocal woman, a woman who is very vocal, because you have to remember Solomon is intelligent, he's wise, he's rich, he's a king, he's popular. He has a lot of women already. So a woman who has too much to say is not going to work with a Solomon, because he's already going to believe that he's at this elevated level. And if he's at this elevated level, it's going to be very difficult to try to have a relationship with him. A woman who is manipulative. All right. We know that he fell into idolatry. It doesn't necessarily say that he was manipulated with the intent, right? If you marry women who are worshiping other gods, and they tell you they want you to serve the same gods they do, could you say that's manipulation? Yeah. But at the same time, we can't necessarily say it was with bad intent, that they believed that their God was the true God, or they believed their God was a God, right? And they wanted their husband to serve the same God that they did. So someone who is manipulative, and then also non-religious women. If you don't believe in the Bible, if you don't believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, you are a bad match for a Solomon, because you will draw him into a lot of worldly things. You will draw him away from the Most High. That's not what should be going on. So you have to understand, this is a bad match for a Solomon, right? And who is Solomon today? All right. Solomon is going to be your celebrity actor, model, athlete, or entertainer, someone who is well known, someone who is famous, someone who you can go Google. This is what you're signing up for if you want to deal with that level of man, because we're talking about Solomon was an elite man. It's going to be very difficult to deal with somebody on that level and think that you're going to get what you think you're getting. So you have to understand, this is who Solomon is going to be in 2024. He's going to be that elite man. He's also going to be known for the woman he deals with. Like, remember people like Derek Jeter, people like Ben Affleck, people like Drake. You hear about all these women that these men are dealing with, right? Why? It's in the public knowledge. Why? Because this is who these men are. It's not a secret what they're doing. Look at somebody like Future, all the baby mamas. Women know what they're going to get if they deal with somebody like Future. But these women still continue to deal with him, and that's no shot to Future. But the bottom line is, he has those Solomon-like characteristics that these women are going for. It could be the money, it could be however you look at it. But at the end of the day, you have to understand what you're signing up for. And then also, we're talking about a very high level. We're talking about the top 1% of men making over $500,000 million a year. So we're talking about a very elite group of people who are also in some sort of the public forum, not the private millionaires, not somebody who has more like a Jacob mentality, but we're talking about they have to be in the public, because remember, Solomon was very well known. Next, let's get to someone like Samson. Okay, Samson was strong, obviously, right? He was a Nazarene, meaning he didn't cut his hair. I believe he wasn't supposed to drink wine and things like that. If you go into the book of Leviticus, it talks about the rules for to become a Nazarene and things like that. So he was also courageous. He is that definition of what a lot of these men talk about when you want to talk about that alpha male, right? He was a leader. He was a protector. So these are the things that Samson is. You understand? Some of the bad things about Samson, or just like I said, a different side of him. He was temperamental. We know that because he killed a lot of people. You know, he killed a lot of people. Look at what happened to his first situation when he was dealing with his first couple of wives that he had. That whole situation went really bad. All right, look at all the men he killed with the jawbone of a donkey. So he's a very temperamental person. Even how he got up out of here, temperamental. I mean, you know, you could say that, you know, that was, he asked for strength and get up. Samson had a temper. If you didn't understand that Samson had a temper, I don't know which book you're reading. Okay, he was a liar. Now, regardless whether you say he was trying to be manipulated by Delilah, yes, he was, but he still was lying to her because he didn't necessarily know that she was trying to betray him. So a man that will just openly lie to you in your bed is, I mean, you got to think about what you're trying to deal with. He was easily manipulated, obviously, because he gave up the secret of his strength, you know, based on one woman being able to manipulate him. And all it took was a few tears, and now all of a sudden your strength is gone. And now, you know, you can easily be destroyed now. Stubborn, meaning that, you know, Samson was stuck in his ways. You know, he was very, very stuck in his ways. So a Samson, I mean, when you're dealing with somebody who has a very, very strong personality, then, you know, this is what you're dealing with. And naive. He was a little naive because he trusted a woman who kept asking the same question over and over and over and over again. He kept giving the wrong answer. But he was somewhat naive. You know, this is like somebody saying, hey, you know, if you really love me, you give me your debit card password. You give me your debit card pin. You know, if you really, really loved our relationship, you would really give me that pin card to your debit card that has all your money in it. Oh, you don't really love me, because if you did, you would give me your debit card pin number. It's like, why does she keep asking about my debit card pin number? It should have been a very simple transition. But once again, Samson is also kind of naive. So let's get to who would be a good match for a Samson. Obviously, somebody who's physically attractive, because I believe that's who Delilah was. I also said someone who is foreign, right? Because Delilah was a Philistine, so she was a foreign woman. She was not an Israelite. She was not of the same stock. So a physically attractive foreign woman, and someone who is an ego booster, someone who will just tell you how great you are all day, someone who will say whatever they need to say to try to manipulate you to get whatever they want from you. That is going to be a good match for a Samson. Not even saying that that is good, but what I'm saying is someone who is boosting your ego. That is going to be a good match for the Samson prototype, right? Not necessarily saying that that is good, that somebody is basically boosting your ego to try to manipulate you, but that is going to be a good match, because that way, you know, it could go really, really wrong dealing with a Samson. You understand what I'm saying? If you're not doing that. A bad match. A bad match is obviously going to be an alpha female. How in the world could you be with the strongest man on the planet? If you're an alpha female, a manipulative woman, obviously. Because if he's easily manipulated, he can tell you the secret of his strength, the secrets that he has, and things like that. And then you're going to use those secrets against him to manipulate him in the future. That would be a bad match. A hairdresser, right? That's a little bit of a joke. So if you understand the story, obviously, a hairdresser would be a bad match for a Samson because you'd be wanting to cut his hair and you'd be wanting to take his strength away. So that's a little jokey joke. And lastly, a woman that is combative. We're talking about, very, very strong individual. You don't want to be going back and forth with a very strong temperamental man. And we've seen how this could go wrong in many other cases. So let's see who Samson is today. So Samson will be your personal trainer, your athlete, or your bodybuilder, people like this who are going to use their physical stature, their physical appearance, their physical superiority, right? Doesn't necessarily mean that he has a lot of money. You understand what I'm saying? Samson could just be like some of these people that you see like throughout Instagram and things like that. They have these different type of training classes, or they've always got pictures with their shirt off and things like that. They're trying to use like their physical appearance, their body lust, to try to make you go after them. You know what I mean? They could, like you said, be above average in different areas. You understand what I'm saying? To try to lure you in. So they're going to basically try to use their physical prowess, but they might not necessarily be offering too much outside of that. But these men are definitely going to be trying to get you with some sort of level of attraction. They're going to be very superficial, meaning they are going to take their physical appearance very, very important. At the same time, they're also going to be looking at you the same way as well. So they're going to be looking to get the most attractive women, deal with the most attractive women, probably deal with multiple attractive women. And then they can be known to become violent, right? I would hate to say it, but your Samsons will probably be where the physical abusers are going to be. Your domestic violence, it's more than likely going to come from a Samson. Because based on why y'all got together, a lot of toxic relationships would probably come if you were dealing with someone who was a Samson. Like I would say, I think in my other one, a Samson and a Delilah is a horrible match. And we saw how it ended, okay? And the last person that I'm going to talk about is going to be Esau. Now, Esau was powerful, right? He was what they call a bad boy. It says he was a man of the field, right? So I'll get into a little bit later about what that could possibly mean. But he was also ambitious. He was athletic and he was street smart. If you look at what Esau was doing, if you look at kind of how he tried to do things later on in the Bible, dealing with Jacob, a lot of things that end up happening between Edom and Israel, then you have to give a little bit of credit to what it was. But Esau was also a hunter. Now, the other things that are going to be on that other side of the ledger with Esau is he was a master manipulator. All right. He was vengeful. He wanted to kill his own brother. So you have to never be able to forget that Esau wanted to kill his own brother based on him not getting the blessing, which he had already sold for a cup of soup earlier. So you have to understand he was vengeful. He was a violent man. All right. Esau wanted to handle things through violence. Okay. If you get into the book of Jasher, then you also know that the story says in the book of Jasher that Esau killed Nimrod. Okay. And that's the reason why he was so tired when he came and sold his birthright to Jacob, because he had just killed Nimrod and his 2 bodyguards. And he ran back to Jacob's house and he just needed something because I guess it was a pretty intense battle with Nimrod, who was a beast in his own right. But Esau killed him if you rock with the book of Jasher. But that's one of the stories from the book of Jasher, that Esau killed Nimrod. He was a liar. He was so upset about his birthright being stolen. So even though I already talked about how Jacob was somewhat deceitful, Esau knew that blessing did not belong to him because he had already sold it for a cup of soup. I've already brought that up. So for him to not have said, he was like, oh, Father, don't you have another blessing for me? Do you only have one blessing? And, Jacob's name means to supplant, right? So he already knew what was going on, but that's going to be the part. And then the last thing about Esau was he was sneaky. Esau was trying to do things very sneakily. So if you get back into the story, what happened with him and Jacob, and them meeting up again and things like that, then Esau was a very sneaky individual. If you go, once again, dealing with some of the extra biblical stories, maybe in the book of Jasher, there's a story about Esau I believe it was at the funeral of think it was at the funeral of Jacob in the book of Jasher. It talks about how Esau was trying to manipulate and basically say that he never promised Jacob these lands. And it ended up turning to the sons of Esau versus the sons of Israel and all that stuff. It's a cool story. I would even say recommend it, even if you don't rock with the book of Jasher. It's a cool story about what happened at Jacob's funeral, because it turned into this big battle with the sons of Esau versus the sons of Jacob. I think Naphtali was kind of like the Flash, and he had to, I think, run down to Egypt and get the paperwork to prove that Esau had signed away. I mean, it's a cool story, man. So if you want to get some cool stories, man, there are a lot of cool stories in the book of Jasher. Regardless of whether they happened or not, that's not what I'm here to debate. I'm just saying cool story. I can watch Star Wars and say cool story. You understand what I'm saying? So if I get cool stories within a biblical narrative, I'm rocking with it. All right. So let's see who would be a good match for Esau. Okay. Your good match for Esau would be, let me get on down to it here. Hold on. Sorry, because I told you I cannot see my screen, so I got to do these simultaneously. A polyamorous woman. If you know about Esau, his first 3 wives, the first 2 wives were Canaanites. The third one was a daughter of Ishmael. And he got that third wife just because he was trying to please his wife. So he started out with 2 Canaanite wives, and then he got a third, and we don't know how many other women or concubines that Esau also had, but he was definitely considered polyamorous because he wasn't dealing with one woman, and we know at least he had 3. I say a good match would be women who don't mind bailing their partner out of jail. If you're dealing with Esau, you're probably dealing with one of these dudes out here in the street. You understand what I'm saying? It said he was a man of the field. We would say the field now is the streets. That's what we would say. You understand? The field now, because if you have Jacob being the counter opposite, right? He's the complete opposite of his brother. So if Jacob is a man who like to chill at the crib, like to be around mama, like to kind of be indoors, then what's the opposite of that right now? The homebody. What's the opposite of him? The man who out there in the street, the man who's out here doing all these other different things that are sometimes not good. That's where you would be. So a woman who don't mind showing up to the courthouse, a woman who don't mind showing up to bail her man out of jail, you dealing with an Esau, all right? Women with patience. You got to have a lot of patience if you're trying to deal with an Esau. If you're dealing with a man with a lot of Edomite characteristics, you better have a lot of patience to deal with them. And another good match would be a woman who is materialistic. They will say, well, why would you say that? Because Esau, being kind of simple, he's the man that'll give you what you want. He'll give you that jewelry, all those material things that some of you women are asking for. Esau will give it to you, right? Because he already said, well, I got multiple women anyway, and he don't look like he want to have no problem as far as the women is concerned. But Esau was not a poor man. Esau was not any of those things. Esau was rich as well. You know, he developed the king. You know, he became his son stuff became the kings of Edom and the dukes of Edom and all the other things. So it wasn't like we're talking about somebody who was not well to do as well. So if you're a materialistic woman and you're willing to deal with all the other things, the multiple women, bailing them out of jail, but you got patience and you know you're more concerned about the material side of things than the actual heart of the man, then you know Esau could technically be a good match for you. A bad match for an Esau would be the complete opposite of what a lot of women are. Someone who is religious, okay? We know that later on the Edomites began to worship a different God. They moved away from Yahweh. So we know that a religious woman would be a bad match. When I say religious, I'm only speaking Bible believer. So if you're dealing with someone who's dealing with the Bible, and things like that, someone outside of a traditional religious or even the Abrahamic faith is not going to be a good match for Esau, right? So he needs that spiritual woman. He needs those women who say, I'm spiritual, not religious. I believe in the universe. You know, they want to talk about their zodiac sign. You're probably a better match for Esau, all right? Someone who is family oriented. Esau, I mean, we don't really know about it because we didn't really get the whole story, but Esau, why would you want to, if you have all the other prototypes that I went before, even a Solomon, right? Or a Samson, why would you want to deal with an Esau? If you have all them other choices to build a family with them, why wouldn't you? The Esau is probably a lot of your, the father of a lot of your children out there. And I'm especially talking about black women in the black community. You're probably dealing with an Esau and you don't know it. A woman who is traditional, meaning you want to be married, you want to have a traditional family. Why would, once again, would you deal with an Esau? And if you are an Esau, why would you want to mess with a woman who is traditional? All right. Esau was aggressive, and he was disloyal, unloyal. I think that Summer Walker song messed me up because I don't know which one in English is correct. Is it unloyal or is it disloyal? But he wasn't a loyal individual. He kind of would turn sides. So basically, he's going to do that. So who is Esau today? Esau is the street dude, right? Some of you women, the men you love, these street dudes out here are your Esau. It doesn't mean that all men who are in the street are Esau. This is just prototypes, right? He's got potential felonies, right? He's loyal to his elders, because the one thing about it, you cannot say Esau was a bad son. That's the one thing that you cannot. You can say a lot of things about Esau, but he wasn't a bad son to his father. He loved his father, and it was obvious that he loved his father. He dealt with multiple women. We know that for a fact. So if you're dealing with one of these type of dudes and you think you're the only woman that's around, you're fooling yourself. The last thing I say was he was good-hearted, but it was rarely seen. And what I mean by that is I think sometimes Esau, in the narrative dealing with him and Jacob from the time he was born to basically once we get outside the story of Jacob. I'm not talking about the Edomites. I'm only speaking of Esau, who he was as a man while he was living. First of all, at his birth, it talked about basically he was different. It says, he came out red all over like a hairy garment, right? So all of these different things about Esau made him different. You got to think about him and Jacob were twins. However, his birth was the first birth in the Bible where it talks about something different happened at his birth that would separate him. So I feel like Esau started his life off as somewhat of a pariah. And then as he continued to advance, now he's got the love of his father, doesn't necessarily have the love of his mother, because we already know, because the book says so, that Isaac favored Esau and Rebekah favored Jacob. So Jacob is the one that was more than likely nurtured by his mother, and Esau was the one who was more than likely raised up by Isaac. Not saying like they were in separate homes, but if you think about that, it kind of played out a little bit. That's why I always say when we start talking about building these families, we start talking about any of these things, you need balance, because you don't want to have the mama's boy all the way on the right of a Jacob sometimes necessarily, because we can see what type of men that produces, but you also don't necessarily want the ultra aggressive raised by my father or, father dominant person on the other side, because then you could end up with an Esau. You understand what I'm saying? Because that's the reason why they both have to have somewhat of a balance. But I do believe at his core, he was not the villain that I feel like he's been made a lot of times anywhere. Esau is always seen as a villain. Now, I'm not also trying to take up for him either, but what I am saying is he becomes one of these super villain-like characters in the Bible. But if you actually go back and look at what happened to him, I think a lot of times, I just say, once again, put yourself in his shoes. You're the oldest. Your dad tells you to go hunt, bring some food back, and then when you come back, your father's looking at you crazy. Well, he didn't look because he was blind. But I'm like, yep, I'm back. I made the food you asked me, so can I get my blessing? And it's like, I already gave it to you. And then at that point that your own brother had betrayed you. You understand what I'm saying? Your own mother had betrayed you, because the one thing about it was, it's never talked about in the story, but he didn't have no smoke for his mother either. He only had smoke for his brother, even though his mother was like, his mother was the one who informed Jacob, hey, he's about to bless Esau. We got to hurry up and get it before he gets back. But from what we know, Esau didn't hate his mother for even going and telling Jacob that. So just something to think about. Once again, a quick little check for understanding, man. So once again, which man do you mostly identify with? Number 2, ladies, which type of man do you seem to attract? And if you're attracting a lot of Esau's and Samsons, you're probably at the club, you're probably out there in the street, you're probably somewhere you don't need to be. I don't think you're attracting a lot of Esau's and Samson if you're at church, you're at home. I mean, you could be at Home Depot and attract anybody. But the bottom line is, you have to ask yourself, if these are the type of men you are attracting, right, then where are you meeting these men? And lastly, what changes are you willing to make? So if you are attracting a lot of Esau's or Samsons or even Solomons, right? Because the Solomons ain't necessarily that great either if you want a traditional family man, but you just keep saying, oh, I just keep running into NBA players. It's like, that don't even make no sense. How can a woman only date NBA players? That just sounds weird to me. But anyway, that is just what you got to say. And the men out there with some of these characteristics, what can you be honest about yourself and say the characteristics that describe some of these men? Which one would you fall into? I would say, even though my name is Solomon, right? I wouldn't describe myself as a Solomon. I have some of his characteristics, but I'm not anybody famous, nobody's athlete, nobody's top 1%, all of that stuff. Some of you men out there might think you're a Solomon, but you're actually not. You know what I mean? So that might be sometimes the delusion that men like to live in, because you're thinking you're somebody that you're not. So it's just something to think about. And then once again, for next time, God's plan versus your personal ambition. That's what I'm going to be talking about. We always like to talk about God's plan. One thing that I don't like when people talk about God sending them people or God doing that, I'm like, that gets tricky. Because if you want to say God sent somebody to you and you believe the person that God sent to you is there, if it doesn't work out, then now you're calling God a liar. So you got to be very careful with this. Oh, I'm waiting on God to send me the right person, or I'm waiting on God to get me this job or get me this house or get you whatever you could be trying to sit there and wait on. And then it doesn't work out, because then all you do is you make the Most High a liar. And we don't want to have to do that. If you haven't already, man, make sure you go ahead and like the show. Make sure you're going ahead and sharing the show out there with other people. And then, like I said, we're talking about ambition, your personal ambition. Is this what God wants you to be doing? Or is this what you want to do and you want God to bless you along the way? They are two completely separate things, and you have to be able to understand the difference. What God has for you versus what you want for yourself, and you want God to bless your ambition and your desires. So you have to be able to see the difference. And I'm going to go into multiple biblical examples of where God had a plan, but man said something completely different, and then they were only concerned about their own personal ambition. So once again, man, I want everybody to have a great Saturday. Be safe out there, man. If you got loved ones, try to take time to go out and see them. Go spend some time with your loved ones, man. Hug your kids, hug your wives, kiss your wives, all that good stuff, man. Y'all spread some love out there. Until next time, man, I've been the Kung Fu Hebrew. Shabbat Shalom.